Hello, welcome back to the podcast and welcome back to the YouTube channel. For those who don't know me, I'm Renny with Hill with Renny, and this is Surviving and Thriving. And yeah, I am wishing you all a happy end of 2025 because this year has been a roller coaster ride, okay? And I am so excited for this very karmic year to end. But today, I really just want to talk about setting our old identities and really embodying and stepping into newer identities and newer versions of ourselves. This is something that I honestly had really been struggling with all of 2025. And it's really interesting because I feel like a lot of people, especially people who are, in the spiritual community in particular, have really been talking about how this year it kind of felt like they were torn between two worlds. And for me, as someone who has been diagnosed with BPD, for those who don't know what that is borderline personality disorder, and has been healing from complex trauma. I'm someone who grew up with a lot of severe childhood trauma. And we talk a lot about this online, and I've come to understand, especially over the past several years, as I've like struggled with the lowest of lows with my mental illness, um, that people think that they understand what it means to be someone who suffers from severe mental illness. They don't. A lot of people are familiar with things like depression and anxiety, but they're not really familiar what it means to be someone really recovering from severe trauma and having to reshape your whole sense of normalcy because you never had that, especially as a child. And a lot of people think that they grasp what that means, but they really don't. And I've really come to understand that. And, I've definitely had to sit with the difficulties and challenges of embodying a new identity when it is coming from like an extreme transformation. Okay. And if you resonate with this, then I think that this episode will probably be for you because just to backtrack a little bit and talk more about my experiences and my journey, because I've shared things before, but I feel like people don't really understand, So passion that I have when it comes to healing and mental illness is because the way that I grew up, I didn't realize, and I think a lot of people who've experienced severe trauma might resonate with this. You don't really realize how abnormal it is until you get out into the world and you come across other people and you start to realize, wow, these experiences that I've had and the way that they shape the way that I view people and others and the way that I show up in relationships, it's not normal, nor is it healthy, right? And then a lot of us who have been on this journey of trying to recover and heal, that is one whole really difficult, challenging part of it that a lot of people get trapped in, right? But then once you do kind of get to a place where it's like, I am starting to feel different and I am starting to feel like I can finally have a life that I never thought I could have. Because again, if you're someone like me and you've spent most of your entire life just trying to survive, just trying to literally survive, it can be hard to even think about like thriving and what that looks like and what that version of you looks like. And especially if you're also battling the perceptions of others as you're on this journey. Okay. So for me, for example, the version of myself that I think a lot of people got to know is a version of myself that was still really functioning out of trauma and pain and was really not fully present. To be completely honest, when I was in my lowest of lows, I would say between 2020 and now, so since I've lived in the city that I live in currently, I have been in the lowest of my mental illness since living here because a lot of things that I knew I was someone who experienced a lot of trauma. I didn't really understand the depth that how that impacted me until 2020, really. 2019, 2020, when I first started, to be in the mental health care system and actively seeing psychiatrists and actively like taking medications and getting treatment. I did not realize just how much I had been impacted by my upbringing and by the things that I've experienced in life because for so long I was so disassociated and I was just performing. I didn't even really realize until like it kind of came to a head. And a lot of people, especially where I'm currently residing, got to know the version of me that was really in my lowest points. Okay. And that version of me, I was so unwell. Um, and like I've definitely gone back into some of those patterns, even throughout this year. Like there have been times where I've gone back into those patterns because that's what feels normal to me, and that's it's really hard to break out of it. I don't think people really understand. It's really easy to talk about change when you're talking about someone else, but when it's yourself, it's a whole different story, especially if it's something that like has been subconsciously programmed in your mind. So for me, I grew up very, very rough. Sometimes when I say that, I don't know what people think I mean, okay? And so I'm trying to understand now that the more people that I've met in life, the more I've come to understand is like when I say I grew up rough, I think people don't really understand what I'm saying. So, um, to explain, like I had no stability for most of my life. And in my formative years, I didn't have either of my parents present. My elderly grandma, who, was very low income and very physically unwell, was caring for me. And I had neither of my parents present. I did not grow up with my father. My mom was incarcerated when I was a young child. I was present for a lot of really violent instances in my family. I've seen a lot of violence and things that a lot of children shouldn't have been exposed to. I didn't realize that because it was so normalized in my family. And I was actually brought up to think that I was lucky and blessed and spoiled. I still think that this is like an attitude that people where I come from carry, to be honest, is that I'm like privileged. And it's really interesting because then I meet people who hear about my upbringing and it's like the complete opposite response. And so, the identity that I've been trying to recover from has been really confusing because it's like I've been torn always between two completely different worlds, and it's been really hard to even find who I am and where I fit in life because the world that I grew up in was so dark and unhealthy that the people there don't even realize it, right? That's all they know. All they know is that darkness and hustle and grind and suffering and grief and violence and pain and struggle. That's all that they know. And it's really hard to come from that type of life. And basically, your entire life, you have just been abused, talked down on, neglected. I'm someone who's faced every type of abuse. If you can think of a type of abuse, I've probably faced it. And a lot of the people in my family have as well. And again, it's something that's so normalized that I feel like there's parts of us that have become so desensitized to it, even, right? And I've learned, at least from my experience, when you grow up in these types of environments and you become used to pain and suffering and violence and abuse, you acquire some very unhealthy traits. You can become someone that's either very apathetic, you can become someone that's borderline psychotic at times, you can become someone that's very narcissistic because your entire focus is just on your own survival. It's very like I don't want to say animalistic, but I can't think of a better word. But like when you come from the mud, when you come from pain and suffering, that's all you know. And so that's all you get used to, and all you get used to is fighting. You don't even know how to receive love because you don't know what that feels like. And so my entire upbringing, like, I'm not gonna say I'm someone who didn't receive love because I did receive love, but in my home life, it was very tumultuous. It was very violent. It was very volatile. And even though I feel like in some ways the way that I grew up, we coped in like with humor or things like that, which is something I'd still do. It felt very loveless. There's no better way for me to say it. It felt very loveless. I was verbally abused, physically abused, sexually abused. Um, there were times where we struggled financially, and then there were times when we were okay, but still, like it felt very loveless, and like I didn't ever have my emotional needs tended to. I never felt supported during pivotal points in my life. And again, I just never felt loved. I felt very abandoned for most of my childhood. And I witnessed so much anger and rage and violence that that became my way of expressing my emotions rather than learning how to regulate my emotions and express them in a healthy way. And when people did leave this world, because I have experienced a lot of death really early in life as well, very sudden, unexpected, and sometimes even violent deaths. Um, we never came together and really talked through grief or what that looks like or comforted one another. I still struggle with that sometimes, with knowing how to comfort people because I was not comforted as a child. I really wasn't. I was not comforted in my upbringing. When difficult situations arose, a lot of the ways that I think that my relatives and those around us grew up was just to be strong. And their idea of strength was rooted in, if you can get through really difficult situations and seem unfazed, even if you're not unfazed. So there was really not a lot of, coming together and crying and hugging each other and telling each other we love each other. Um, it's not that that didn't happen, it was just really rare. Okay. And the people in my life who did that for me have all passed away. I lost those people really early in life. The people I felt the closest to and felt did provide me with that type of emotional support are not here. And so, this is just a nutshell of the type of life that I was used to and the type of experiences that I was used to. So then, having to go through so many years, and I'm again still in the process of unlearning patterns of behaviors that I was taught from this upbringing, of unlearning the ways that I've been taught to close myself off from real healthy connection, of unlearning patterns of behaviors that are actually harmful and toxic. And, my family didn't really have boundaries. So boundaries is something I've always struggled with because we didn't have boundaries. All of my boundaries were always crossed my entire life. And I think that we understand now, I think more people understand now the impact of our childhood, but like when it's so severe and um it's so different than what is considered healthy or normal. I don't think people really understand what the process of shedding that old self and unlearning those old patterns and then coming into an entirely new identity. I don't think people really understand how much work that is. How few people do that, okay? A lot of the people I know who resonate the most with my experiences, I'm gonna be completely honest, the people that I've met that genuinely understand where I'm coming from are people that have been homeless, or people that have struggled with addictions, are people that have been in the criminal justice system. I feel like when I share a lot of my experiences or, about like where I come from, people who really get it are people who they themselves have been either close or adjacent to the underbelly of the world. And then people who are living quote unquote normal, because normal is relative, but like normal lives, like they don't understand it. And the most they can do is try to provide empathy or sympathy or pity for me. And it makes me uncomfortable, but I understand that people don't get it if they can't really understand, if they haven't gone through these things themselves, right? So there might be people who have gone through some of these things, but again, they don't fully understand it and they don't fully understand the process of like healing those things, right? And I'm someone who has very severe mental illnesses. So as I've been through this process of trying to heal and shed like my old identity, I have also had to, mostly with very little support, try to do all these things when a lot of the times I was completely out of touch with reality. There were times when my mental health and my mental illness were so poor that I was struggling with auditory hallucinations. I would go into periods of psychosis where I wasn't even sure who I was, where I was, and it was like I was going back into very traumatic incidences in my life. Sometimes I didn't even realize I was doing it. I've experienced like age regression where I've gone back into periods where very traumatic things happened and it felt like I was back in that age. So I say all this to say is that this process of shedding has been very difficult because for me, it's quite literally felt like a death. It's like a form of a death because everything that I've known for the past 33 years that I've been on this planet has been just trying to survive and trying to appear normal until I couldn't because all of the things that I was running from for so long caught up to me and then I basically had multiple mental breakdowns and had to, get support, but the system isn't really full, like there's a lot of flaws in the system. And so a lot of times it made it worse. Like I've just had a really hard time with recovery and I've mostly been doing this alone. I don't have like a lot of family to support. I don't. come from, I don't come from environments like that. So it's been really, really hard. And only through research have I realized how rare it is to come out of things this heavy with very little support. I'm someone who survived multiple unalived attempts, and the suicide rate for people who have BPD is really high, and it's higher if you don't have support. If you don't have access to resources and support, if you don't have family, that rate is higher and higher. And so lately, I've been really sitting and reflecting on how much I've overcome that people genuinely don't understand because they only go by what they see externally. And, I'm not close enough with a lot of people I don't trust enough people. I don't really trust anybody, but this is something I'm working on. I don't trust enough people to let people close to me to really understand me or know what I'm going through. I try my best to show up as honestly and authentically as I can, but something that I've learned as I've been through this process is that people are going to have a perception of me rooted in their own experiences, and I have to come to terms with that. But I still have to choose to step into this new identity anyway. And it's been really hard. I've really had to set boundaries with people that I didn't really want to. I've really had to step away from people that I didn't really want to. And I've had to convince myself that I am becoming someone that I didn't think that I would ever be able to become because I was so conditioned to believe that all I could ever be was what I grew up thinking that I could be, which based off of what everyone ever told me was nothing. Like literally very few people made me feel like I could be anything. And I spent the majority of my life trying to prove them wrong. And I am making this episode because I want people to know that the journey to becoming that version is very painful and difficult. And the journey of shedding the old self is actually a journey of navigating grief, very intense grief. I feel like I am losing myself and trying to build a new, healthier version of myself and trying to form an identity that's actually healthy and will allow me to not only receive love and care, but give others love and care and not just function like a pit bull that needs to protect constantly because of fear, because of trauma, because of pain, because of all of my past experiences. And I feel like I'm closer than ever to being fully embodied in this new version. And it's been the most painful and difficult process yet because I realize in trying to step into this new version, this version of myself that, knows how to regulate their emotions in healthier ways, that knows how to communicate their needs, that knows how to set boundaries and also adhere to other people's boundaries, which again, boundaries is something I've always struggled with, that doesn't chase and that, knows how to surrender control. I'm still struggling with some of these things, but the closer I get to embodying this new version, the more I realize how attached I am to that version of myself because that's all I've known. And stepping into this newer identity is literally, it feels like jumping off of a cliff. It I think of the full card in tarot. I read tarot, so if you're familiar with tarot, I think of the full card where it's like you want this new beginning so bad, but you don't know what to expect. This is like I feel like I am being reborn into a new life. And the people who have known that version of me, I feel at this stage like they're trying to keep me stuck in that old version of me when my only desire is to experience life now as this healthier version. And it's really difficult because it's easy to go back into those old patterns. It's easy to let trauma-based, fear-based responses come back up because that's, again, comfort zone. That's what I've known. But embodying this new identity is it's the process of reminding myself over and over that I am actually worthy of a life that feels good. I'm actually worthy of connections that are healthy. I'm actually worthy of love and support. And if you've never had that, at first that can actually feel scary and even unsafe, even if it's not, even if you know it's better for you. If literally all you've known is survival and pain and all you've ever had to do is defend yourself or try to protect yourself, then this feels so uncomfortable and unsafe, honestly. And it's been really difficult. And a lot of times I've had like a lot of imposter syndrome. And I feel like people who've known the past versions of myself or the versions of myself I've been healing through, they also only see me in that way, even though they never even understood what got me to that point in the first place. No one ever took time to get to know me or hear my story or any of that. People have only seen me in a specific light. And so if you resonate with this, I think part of this journey is also coming to terms and accepting that for a lot of people, you will be the villain in their story, and they will only ever see you as one specific thing, and that's their journey to take. But if you are someone who is committed to healing and changing and transformation and becoming the best version of yourself, then you can, one, yes, hold yourself accountable for it, but you can't change anyone's perception of you. And you really shouldn't try, because I feel like me trying to do that for so long actually kept me stuck in that old version rather than allowing me to blossom into this new version. The best thing you can do is allow those people to have whatever opinion of you that they have and move forward anyway, and prove to yourself first and foremost that you can transform and you can change and you can heal. And from there, I feel like once people see that, then it's really up to them. But this is not their journey. It's your journey. And so part of like shifting identities for me has, one, been radical acceptance of the ways that I have shown up in the past and the perceptions that people have of me because of the ways that I've shown up in the past, because only I really understand what was happening and what I was going through. There's no way that they will fully understand it, okay? And also, I have had to take accountability for the role that I played in someone else's pain or suffering or growth as well. And I feel like whatever they feel is valid, but for a long time I was letting those things make keep me stuck, because I think a big part of healing very severe trauma especially is shame. There's a lot of guilt and shame, and for me, I realized that I was keeping myself stuck in old identities because I was letting that shame and that guilt eat me alive and kind of make me believe that I don't deserve better, that I don't deserve to live a better life or change or to experience goodness or to have healthy connections. I don't deserve it. And for a long time, I let that type of negative self-talk keep me stuck in old repeating cycles and basically reinforcing these negative core beliefs that other people had about me that I then had about myself. And so as I've been shifting out of, this identity, it's really been a work of not only shifting my core beliefs about myself and understanding like where the negative core beliefs came from, but also allowing myself to really start to believe that I do deserve better despite the past version of myself and their actions. Because now, for me, a goal of mine is to help others. And I really genuinely want other people who do come from like the underbelly of the world, or who do know what true suffering is like, to know that it is possible to heal and to have a healthy, thriving life. I feel like a lot of people don't know or believe that, and so they do get stuck in these cycles where, they're in abusive relationships, they're struggling with addiction, they're just not living a life that is fulfilling or whole. And a lot of times it's because of that deep-rooted shame and guilt, that because of your life experiences and because of the mistakes you've made and because you were only taught to function out of trauma and pain and survival, and you might have done some things that you aren't proud of, you start to believe that's all that you are and that's all that you deserve. And I just genuinely, at this stage of my life, want other people to understand and know that that doesn't have to be the case, and that there is an entirely different aspect to life that a lot of people have never gotten to experience, that they deserve to experience, regardless of what they've done in the past. I feel like that's what's going to help us all collectively build a better world. I think the more we get stuck in trauma and pain and survival, the more we continue to repeat those very harmful cycles. And I think the more people that heal and come out of that and actually realize that they can have a deeply rewarding, fulfilling, loving life, that's actually healing for everybody, right? Because those people are no longer causing harm because they were harmed. They're breaking cycles. And my goal at this stage of my life with this new identity is to help other people break cycles, in the same way that I am. I want to be someone that helps others, but also while I continue to learn and grow at the same time. I think there are enough gurus out there that, have a lot of wisdom to share, But I don't think there are enough people who've actually come from the darkest depths that are sharing their stories and how they have healed and transformed and actually still were able to create a life that was meaningful and worthwhile and actually able to overcome their darkest depths, their shadows, and become the highest version of themselves. And that's really what my goal is now. But that process is ugly and painful and scary, and it's just not a good journey. It's difficult, and a lot of people see that and they only focus on the ugly aspects of it. They only focus on the negative ways you've shown up. And I feel like our culture in general is really black and white and lacks nuance. It's like if someone shows their shadow, then people say things like, "Oh, that's their true colors." It's like, no, I have both light and dark. Like we all have that. And a lot of us have been conditioned to only show the lightest parts of ourselves, and I feel like that's performative. And those of us who do come from really, really, really tough upbringings, some of us, we have scarier shadows, but we all have that darkness in us. And I really want to kind of, part of my journey that I feel like I'm on right now is helping people come to terms with the shadow and understand that there's so much you can learn from your darkness and understand that you can have a super dark shadow and still make the choice to embody the highest version of yourself and heal and live from a place of love and not fear or pain or trauma. I'm someone who wants people to know that you can break out of unhealthy cycles no matter how bad it seems, because I feel like that's the way we all collectively heal, okay? But that's just my personal belief. And this journey is hard. It's really difficult because you're not only fighting against your own core beliefs, you're fighting against the beliefs of everyone around you, the beliefs of how you grew up. Like you're literally having to rewrite an entire narrative of who you are. And part of the journey is rewriting the narrative, and another part of that journey is actually doing the work to integrate and embody that version. And it's really hard because while you're embodying this new version, you're having a funeral for the old version, and it's painful. It's actually very painful. I came into this journey thinking that, maybe one day I would be healthy and healed and happy and be able to have fulfilling connections and have a family. I don't know what it feels like to have a healthy family. I don't know what that feels like. That's been my dream. And I feel like a lot of people who have that don't understand how privileged they are. Um, my life's goal is to just have a healthy, normal family. That's it. And everything else behind it is just to help other people heal so that they can have that too. And as I've been doing this work, I've come to understand that and release a lot of shame and guilt around that version of myself, not because I feel like it's okay, the mistakes that I've made. I don't think it's okay. That's the whole reason why I am on this journey of healing and changing and transforming. I don't think it's okay at all. But I understand it now. And because I understand it, it's actually made the process of healing and shedding it a lot easier because I know how to give love to those darkest parts of myself now. And I used to, and I had an understanding that that part of me, that version of me, didn't deserve love. And now I know that that's really what I needed the most. And I feel like a big part of the identity shift is in realizing that the part of us that we've been taught to shame and hate and repress and dismiss, that part of us that has functioned out of pain and trauma and suffering and that part of us needs love the most because that's the part of us that's actually been trying to protect who I believe we truly are. We talk a lot about like inner child healing and deep core wounds and things like that. And I genuinely am someone who believes that at our core, even the most evil people, even the worst people, at our core, no one comes into this planet evil. I don't think there are any evil babies out there that just came plotting right out the womb, right? I feel like at our core, we are really pure. And I feel like life and experiences and upbringings and situations and thought forms, all these outside external influences impact and dictate who we become. But I also feel like it's important to remember that we actually have a choice in this and we don't have to succumb to that. Regardless of how we have experienced this existence, this human existence, we still always have a choice no matter how far down the path we get. And I really do believe that at our core, we are all just love. You know, I know it sounds woo woo, love and light, whatever. Okay. But I genuinely believe that. Okay. And I feel like this entire process of stepping into the new identity is one, recognizing that our dark sides, our shadow sides, mostly have just been trying to protect that version, that inner child, that like purest version of ourselves that at some point through whatever experience started to feel unsafe, right? And it's not always as severe as it is for me. You know, not everyone has had the type of upbringing that I've had, but I do notice it in pretty much everyone. I'm very hyper vigilant because of my upbringing, and I do notice it in everyone. It's just at differing and varying degrees. Some people are a little bit more trusting because they've had less experiences that have made them scared or made them feel they need to shrink or protect that self. And other people are really closed off. I see a lot of masculines in particular that are really closed off. So, and I do relate to them even as a feminine, I do relate to that to a certain extent. But, you know, once I really started to understand that that darker version of me, that shadow version of me, was really just trying to protect the true me because at some point in life I felt like I was unsafe and I was really conditioned to be tough or strong or whatever. That version of me was just there to protect me. And part of this identity shift has been realizing that I am okay and I'm safe, and really teaching myself that I am safe in safety, that I am safe in love, that I'm safe in all the healthy things that I didn't have growing up that I'm experiencing now for the first time. And it feels unsettling because my nervous system, I'm just not used to it. And it's very difficult. And it's easy to go back into self-sabotaging, you know, toxic traits when you're not used to something. But part of really allowing myself to settle into this new identity is not only shifting the core beliefs around my worth and what, you know, I can have in this lifetime, but also reminding myself that those parts of me aren't really me, actually, not at my core anyway. It's a version of me that was literally born out of pain and was designed to protect me. This is how I've come to understand my shadow side anyway. And it's actually made it really easy. Not really easy. It's definitely not really easy, but it's easier to integrate and then allow myself to let my true self emerge self, because I know that my true self is very sensitive. And I think a lot of people could probably relate to this. Especially if you're someone who is highly sensitive and you grew up in really tumultuous environments. um, it's been a journey of learning what it looks like for me to let that version of myself out as an adult. And a lot of it has been through play, has been through inner child healing. And I think there is a part of me that when it comes out, it's very childlike because she just hasn't been able to come out for the majority of my life. So there's a sense of liberation that I've been healing through lately, and it's been allowing me to reconnect with that version of myself before, you know, all the trauma and pain. And for people who've never had to go through it, I know it looks weird and it can be a little scary and unsettling, but it's part of the process. And I'm someone that really wants to show the realities of what this looks like because I don't feel like enough people do. And because enough people don't, I think people have really misconstrued what it means to heal from, especially like the darkest of situations. And shifting your identity is definitely one of the hardest parts of this journey. Really believing that you can be this newer version of yourself is extremely difficult. And a lot of times you're gonna feel like you're torn between two worlds. You know, you're gonna feel like this is kind of full circle. I'm getting back to my point. But you're gonna feel like what a lot of the spiritual community has been saying. Like there's two different timelines or two different worlds, and you have one foot in one and one foot in the other, and you're kind of like playing this weird balancing game, going back and forth. One is like one you're more familiar with, but it's shitty and it sucks. But that's what you're most familiar with. That's the one you know how to navigate. Like you know all the twists and turns. You got the whole map down in your brain. This one is new. It's healthier, it's better, it's nicer. You don't trust it though, because you don't know it and you don't even know your way around. You don't understand it. That's kind of where a lot of us are, especially if you are someone who's transforming and healing and shifting identities. And it's like at some point, you just have to take the leap and fully dive into that new version, and it's going to feel very ungrounding at first because again, it's new and you haven't been this version of you before, and you're gonna have times when you look back and you might miss some of those things. You might grieve those versions of yourself and you might try to dabble into old experiences or patterns of behavior, but you'll feel completely different and they just won't do the same things for you that they used to do because they're not aligned anymore and you're different now. And it's just gonna feel so uncomfortable. So uncomfortable and sometimes boring and sometimes very unfulfilling, in the beginning because you still have to acclimate to it and it's really difficult to do. And I really wish more people would talk about that because, I grew up with pure chaos around me at all times. There was shit was always hitting the fan all the time. And ease and flow and gentleness and calmness scares me to death. And I didn't realize it until I really sat with myself and sat with, especially this year, why do I keep going back to these old unhealthy patterns of behaviors? They don't align, they don't feel good. Why am I doing this? And then I realized, like, oh, I'm actually terrified. Like, as much as I claim I want this new version or this new life, I'm scared of it. I'm scared of this version of myself. I'm scared. I think a lot of us have this subconscious, deep-rooted fear of being the best versions of ourselves because we don't know what that's like. And it also does require a lot of sacrifice. I've had to sacrifice habits and people and things that I actually considered quite fun that was not good for me, and it's been really difficult to do. So, anyway, I share my journey and I share my experience so that other people out there who go, maybe going through something similar or maybe able to resonate can find at least one other person in this world to allow them to realize that they're not alone in this because it's really hard. And if you are someone that's been healing from severe, severe mental illness like cluster B disorders, especially, then I really feel for you because people don't understand. And a lot of people do villainize and stigmatize us. And it's not to say that their feelings and experiences aren't valid, but I feel like it keeps a lot of us stuck and actually makes it difficult for us to then allow ourselves to step into the new. So, not that you need my permission, but I do hope that this encourages you to keep going because you do deserve to know what it feels like to be that version of you and know what it feels like to experience life in a totally new and healthier and better way. And I truly wish that everyone is able to do that and that we can overcome our fears and allow ourselves to truly step into this new version and experience this new life. And yeah, that's my prayer every day for all of us, especially those of us struggling. Mm. So, anyway, I'm gonna just leave it there. If you listened up until now, this was really a ramble. I think a lot of my episodes kind of are. It's just kind of like a brain vomit. I don't know a better word. It's like it's just thoughts are flowing out. My brain is constantly going, and this is just an example of my thoughts flowing out. So if you stayed and listened, you're a real one, and I really appreciate you so much. And I encourage you to stay connected with me and know you're not alone on this journey. Also, just shameless plug, I did get my spiritual coaching certificate after like 3 years on and off, me quitting, me stopping, me feeling like a fraud, imposter syndrome, me feeling like I needed more work to do. And then once I went back and finalized it, I realized that a big part of the experience of getting your spiritual coaching certificate is shadow work. So over the past couple of years since I started it and stopped it and started it and stopped it, I was doing the work. I was basically accomplishing the program in real time. So I'm really proud now and excited for where this goes, but I'm offering tarot readings now, and I will soon be offering some other really exciting things. I'm really excited for 2026 because I finally feel like I can take all the lessons and integrate it and move forward in this new version. And it's scary and difficult, but we're making it happen, okay? This is the rebrand. It's time. So if you're into tarot, esoteric wisdom, mystical things, all things woo-woo, then follow me. I'm really active on TikTok as well. So anyway, I'm gonna leave it there. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, bye.